so everything is big in Texas. Cool, because I'm going to talk about big. Big is an acronym that I use a lot. And for me, it stands for the big behavioral intelligence gap that we're witnessing currently within the CRO business. I consider CRO the biggest psychological experiment ever. You are, and I calculated that based on the questionnaire that Pep sent to you, you are probably doing more than 10,000 experiments, like with this group, a year, or you did last year. That, if you're doing proper testing, equals about 500 million people that you have B-tested together. How mind-blowing is that, right? You've tested more people than there are Americans living here in the US. So there's this massive, massive experiment going, but we find it so hard to get from that experiment and all this into a phase where we're truly, truly learning what the drivers of customer behavior are. And I'm hoping to give you 2 frameworks that will make you bridge that gap and get a better understanding of your customer's behavior. And I'm very glad to be on this day, because it'll be a full day of psychology, and the first step you have to take is get a better understanding of the way the brain works. And the brain works very, very complex. It is consisting of 100 billion neuron cells, and 1,000 billion glial cells, and 1,000 connections between those cells. That 3 pounds of meatloaf in between your ears is the most complex structure we know exists in the universe. And then today there are 5 very nice, friendly people trying to tell you how it works. Folks, we're just beginning to discover how it works. Psychologists may be like 50, 60 years old. We're really, really at the start of trying to find out what drives our behavior, decisions, emotions, thoughts, etc. So I'm the first one. I'm going to give you a basic framework, which I hope you're all already familiar with, and that is dual processing thinking. We are not one system. There's not one system in our brain. There are 2 systems in our brain. One is you, yourself, right? It's that little voice that's talking. Your consciousness, which is an amazingly cool invention. If you look at evolution, if you believe in evolutionary science, it's a very, very recent add-on to the brain, right? We estimated that it really started evolving 200,000 years ago, where the brain itself is more than 500 million years evolving already. And that add-on, that consciousness, gives us a lot of very, very unique features. We can have imagination. How cool is that? Right? We have awareness. We don't know what it is, how it works, and etc. But how cool is it that you're aware of being here? Right? We wouldn't have that without System 2. And it can think logically, rationally. It can project ourselves into the future. It can think about the future. The other automated emotional system cannot. Right? But they're both sitting there in between your ears and in between the ears of your customer. And you should start looking at your data, at the studies you're doing, and at your A/B test results from that perspective. Because we're not analyzing the data of a user, we're analyzing data and testing 2 users in there. And one is always there, system 1 is always on, and the other one, the consciousness, is now and then showing up. Your task is to find out when, and which of the 2 are persuaded with what arguments. So I'm just going to show you a little bit, make you experience the 2 systems in your brain yourself. I'm going to ask you a question. This is the easy one, so you're fine. How much is 4? Yeah, very good. So 2 and 2 is a calculation. You'd think, I need rational logical thinking. Nope. 2 and 2 is automated. We've done that calculation so often. We have an automated response to it, right? John, I have another one for you. How much is a lot? Very good answer, John. Right, it's 408, but that's because I've shown this calculation so many times, I don't have to do the calculation. For me, it's automated response, but you have to calculate it, right? And if you start doing the calculation, you might experience the effort it is costing. Right? It's quite a bit of mental effort to do this calculation. And it's time-consuming. And if I start shouting out other numbers, you're unable to do it because you're losing focus. So those are the two systems, and they cooperate. I very much like the Stroop task, where you're supposed to read out the color of the word, right? You've probably seen this before. So instead of saying yellow, blue, orange, you have to say green, red, blue, and keep on saying the colors. But maybe you start feeling those two systems in your brain, right? Where there's the automated response to read out the word, and there's the controlled response, like, no, don't read out the word. We have to say the color of the word, right? And the same is happening when users are visiting your website. I don't know whether it's going to work, but have a look at this cross in the middle. And then the faces will start changing. And try to keep looking in the middle. And you might experience that the faces turn really ugly. And then have a look at the faces, because they are pure normal women. They're not that ugly. But have a look at the plus sign again. And they turn ugly again. Really ugly. So, poor ladies. Why I'm showing this? Because I want you to realize that the two systems very often need each other, right? There's so much information bombarded at your system one when these faces are flickering like that. It's just mixing them up. Right? It's too fast. But if you're consciously controlling your attention and you're looking at only one side, your brain is able to process those faces, even though they're even still a bit quickly. So be very glad you have those two systems in your brain, and they assist each other. And I hope you're going to try to find out more about those two systems in your user's brain. And how are they controlling those steps that you see in your web analytics software? I'm going to give you two aspects of each of two systems, just because the time squeeze. If you want to know more, approach any of the psychologists. And the first one I want to show you is that although we think we're always rationally controlling our behavior, very often we're not. I'm not the type of guy that says 95%. I think that's bullshit, especially online. Ask me questions afterwards. But I'm just going to make you experience that discrepancy by a little question. I have two kids. And one of them is a boy. That's him. It's Otis. And how big is the chance that the other one is a boy too? Two kids, one boy. What's the other one? And most of you will think it's probably 50%. And that's exactly how the two systems work. There's an automated response to boy-girl questions, which is 50-50, right? But the logical answer is not 50-50. It is 1/3. I can do the calculation afterwards, but if you start realizing that, hey, I felt as if it was a logical choice, but then it was not, it was an automated response, then you start realizing, oh my God, my conscious rational thinking is very often not involved in my thoughts and decisions. So that's the first aspect. It's very often not there. That's why I'm not a big fan of usability studies, right? Because we're asking people, we're asking their consciousness to tell something about their behavior, which is fine for the conscious part, but definitely not for the more important subconscious processes. Right? We have tons of examples where in usability tests people are saying, oh, I hate pop-ups. Yeah, but very often they are definitely increasing conversion. So much for the conscious control of our behavior, right? And why is this working? There are several things explaining it. One of them might be that the fact that people put more effort on this typical website compared to another one, because they have to get rid of that meaningless pop-up, is telling the brain, you like me better, because why otherwise would you put more effort into me? It's one of the explanations why people love their children so much. I love my boys. And I'm putting so much effort in them that they must be very lovely, otherwise I would be wasting my time, right? Labor-love effect, or IKEA effect, as Dan Ariely calls it. You probably all know this movie where you have to count how many times a basketball team is throwing a ball around, right? I'm still going to show it to you.
The monkey business illusion. Count how many times the players wearing white passed the ball.
Let's count. White team, 1, 2. Okay, they're leaving the scene. Omar, how much times did they throw the ball around? No, because I know you know the movie, and I know you're going to be distracted by the bloody gorilla, right? That's what I want to show you with this movie. Although you know it, the question was not to look at some gorilla. The question was count the balls. And I know if you're looking at the gorilla, you're distracted, right? Your system 2 is sort of, oops, forgot to continue counting. That's why people who do not see the gorilla are able to count to 16. And yes, the curtains are changing color, and someone from the black team is also leaving the scene. So what I want to focus, like system 2, your rational thinking is very often not involved. And if it is involved, it needs full focus. And it can do with only very little amount of information. And then we are looking at digital devices, where we have all these pop-ups and fly-ins trying to distract us. Pepla posted something in the Facebook group. And I go, oh, there goes my focus. And especially on mobile, we see even bigger effects because people have a lot of push notifications and cab drivers maybe trying to kill you when you're biking through town. This is in Amsterdam where I live. So focus is very important. I have a small example of an A/B test there where we're working for a bank that sells saving accounts. Very rational behavior, right? Your system 1 wants to spend money. Your system 2 is able to control that urge and save for later. And then we had a company that emphasized the base interest rate and sort of loyalty fee, trying to make a calculation. Calculations are depleting. You're offering 2 interest rates. All we did was just emphasize one of the rates. Put focus on one, compared to the others, and it's a big winner, where we had only a small change, right? And we were competing to 2 other CRO agencies who completely redesigned the page, had good uplifts, but not as good as this small change. So system 2 really needs focus and only can process a little bit of information. So very typically, if you are in a system 2 market or people are controlling that part of the decision, you see usability types of things working, like less information. People will tell us in usability tests, oh, I love all those filters. And we measure, nope, it should be less because your system 2 can only deal with very little information. Are you still with me? Because I want to go to the other system, which I'm way more fond of. The system that does see the gorilla when the gorilla experiment is shown, right? It's just not bringing it up to your consciousness if you miss the gorilla. But there are 2 characteristics I want to emphasize of system 2. And the first one is that it is fully automated. Right? It's outside of our control. So if we show a picture like this, we have the automated response of looking at her face, her breast, and not see the gorilla. And you're all equal, boys and girls alike. You look at anything but the gorilla. I'm not trying to be sexistic here, but it's just I need an automated response, right? So, yes, the arrow, Pep, is leading to an automated response, because if we see an arrow, it induces action. So if we test arrows, man, they have a big impact, right? We just added those arrows there, and then we look at the scroll map, and we see that if people see the arrow, then half of them reach get all the way down to the bottom of the page. Whereas if they do not, are not shown an arrow, only 1 out of 10 reaches the bottom of the page. Does it increase conversion? Depends on the persuasive content on the bottom of the page, right? In this case, it did. So system 1 is fully automated. We cannot really help it. It's bottom up in this case. And the second thing is it's fully associative, is that we call it? Yeah. It's one big neural network. And if one concept is activated, let's say sour cream, then milk is also activated, and skim milk and buttermilk and orange juice. So if you're talking about sour cream, you're also activating the concept of orange juice. Right? It's a neural network. And that can help you a lot with improving your persuasive dialogue. I have an example here of one of our more high-velocity, huge volume testing client. It's Hostel World. We are emphasizing the cleanliness of the hostels, because we found that people are doubting about the safety of a hostel, right? Because especially if you're like 18 years and you're a girl, and you're going to sleep in a dorm with 15 drunk guys of the same age, you might worry about, is this a safe hostel? But mentioning safety, that's not going to work. They're going to a hotel instead of a hostel. So we need to implicitly give the message that this is a safe hostel. So the more we're testing there, the more we find that we need these implicit clues. And cleanliness is, as is already known in science for a while, is an indication of how safe a hostel is. So we see a very nice effect there, especially among women, on the conversion rate. Associations. Associations are also very relative. This is a very low velocity client of ours. They can run only, I think, 24 experiments a year, like that. Otherwise, they have not enough power. So we need big impact tests. What did we do? They're selling beds and mattresses anywhere between, let's say, $100 and $2,000, $3,000. And we want to have to lower the price perception. We found out that a lot of people here, 60% or so, are not buying for themselves, but for somebody else. I'll get back to that later. So how do we get the perception lower? Well, we added this box here. And it says, do you know what a good night of sleep is costing? The average person sleeps 8 hours, spends 10 years with this mattress, so it'll be 80 cents per month. And our system 1 only takes into account what it sees, right? You could do this calculation yourself, but system 1 is not going to respond to it if it's not there. We call it what you see is what there is, Wisiati. And now it sees that it's only 80 cents per month. And there's an extra effect. If you mention prices per month, we start comparing it, because everything's relative, to other prices per month. So any subscription plans that you pay monthly, or your mortgage, right? Your rent, your salary, big numbers. 80 cents is nothing compared to those numbers, whereas maybe 100 euros is a lot. It feels like a lot more. So big winner there. And the Wisiati principle, I think Michael Aga was here last year at this conference. When I told him, read Kahneman, and we talked a lot about Wisiati, he became so much fan that he has actually tattooed the Wisiati acronym on his arm. How cool is that? I have no tattoos, but I like this one. So that's about System 1, right? I would love to tell you way more about it, but please listen to all the other speakers, because they're going to tell you more about it. I have one final test that I want to show you, or actually two, and it's called the marshmallow test. Whom of you is having children in the age of like 3 to 7? Wow, quite a few. There is a test called the marshmallow test, where the goal is very simple. You give your child a marshmallow, and you tell him you can eat it if you like, but if you can wait, if you can control like the urge to eat it, and you have not eaten, and I get back in the room like with maximum of 15 minutes, and they have not eaten it, they get another marshmallow, and they can eat both, right? And this is what happened when I did it last week. So my two boys are on the right. This is Otis again, and Hugo on the right side. On the left side is Ray. And his brother asking like, "What did you do?" I ate it. This is really worrisome for me because it's getting worse. It's going to become even more funnier because my oldest one is trying not to look at his marshmallow, which makes it more easy. Look, he has his eyes closed. Ooh, oh. Right. But why does this worry me? You know how it ended? He sneaked out, and I just kept on filming for 15 minutes whether the older ones were able to do it. And then at some point, my oldest one shouted like, "Oh, Otis!" He found the whole bag, and he was like, "Oh." But why is it worrying me? Because my youngest one is 6.5 years of age. He's supposed to pass this test, right? They are going to pass the test anywhere between like 4 and 6 years of age. And it is so far the biggest, the best predictor we have for your child's future health and wealth. And why we assume that is because it tells us how good System 2 is evolving in that brain of your child. How much control and impulse control, self-control is starting to exist there. And I'm really worried about my youngest one. So last thing I want to tell you is that it always sounds interesting, but it's very hard to keep on realizing that we're not that rational. We do not have all these reasons that we think we have for our behavior. So where does this illusion come from? Why do we think we are in control? And there's a very elegant study done by Michael Gazzaniga and Ledoux, which I think very elegantly shows that we post-decision rationalize. You've probably heard about this, but we come up with ratios, reasons, right? Alibis, as I call them, for our behavior after we displayed the behavior, after we made the decision. Your System 2 is constantly trying to make up reasons for your behavior. Not that those were the reasons that caused your decision or your behavior, but it's just to comfort you that you're a rational being. Right? We are always asking each other, why? Why did you buy that? It's because of that and that reason. Bullshit, it's not, but it makes me feel comfortable. Right? I prefer to call our consciousness our comfortness. It's soothing us, you are a rational being. And what Michael did to sort of show how that works is that he was studying split brain patients. These people have epileptic episodes. The brain goes short, their body starts shaking, they fall down, they hit a tree when they're driving a car. And what they used to do with these people is they cut through the corpus callosum, which is the bridge between the two hemispheres, between the two halves of your brain. So there's no longer any information going from left to right anymore. And Michael asked these patients, whom you actually do not notice anything particular in their behavior until you do a study like this. He said, look at the dot. I'll show you a picture, and I want you to grab a card with every hand one card. And he very briefly showed the picture, showed longer to you. And he showed a chicken foot and a snow-covered lane. People were looking at it. What is in the right side of your visual field enters the left part of your brain and the other way around. And then the left part of your brain is controlling your right hand. Are you still with me? So that this part sees the chicken foot and it chooses a chicken head. This part sees snow-covered lane, chooses a shovel. So far, so good. We would do the same. But now they're asked, why did you choose it? And they answer, I chose the chicken head because of the chicken foot, just like you and I would. And then it starts diverting from our answer because they also answer, and I chose the shovel to dig his poo. And that's intriguing. Because why is that answer different? The cause of the difference is that we're asking this question using language, and the left hemisphere is the only part of our brain that is interpreting and producing language. Right? Two areas, Broca and Wernicke, in the left hemisphere. So we're only asking the left part of the brain. And the left part knows, has seen the chicken foot, right? So it knows why it chose a chicken head. It has no clue why the shovel was chosen. But instead of saying, I don't know, the brain becomes, ooh, this is not so comfortable, I have to make up a reason, let's pretend that we're going to dig the poo of the chicken. Post-decision rationalization. Maybe an uncomforting truth, but your brain is post-decisionalizing a lot as well. It's your System 2 at work. System 1 and 2, I hope you got that. I hope you're going to analyze your data, all the studies you're doing, and your A/B tests from that perspective. Which of the two systems am I looking at, and how can I improve that? Then I want to show you one more thing, which I also call big, but it's the behavioral intelligence graph that we're using at Online Dialogue. What we do, so it's graph, right? What we do, we realize we're running psychological experiments trying to influence a lot of behavioral steps, right? You call it customer journey, we call it behavioral steps. And based on those steps, we're trying to test hypotheses to influence those steps, and therefore we run a lot of tests to prove the hypothesis. Those are what we call the 3 layers of CRO. You run your tests to prove hypothesis. You need a lot of tests to prove one, right? Any one of you who's still proving one hypothesis or one A/B test, either stop doing your job or admit that you're a liar. So you run a lot of tests and analysis to prove one hypothesis, and by the time you have proven more and more hypotheses, you're starting to learn more about the real influencing behavioral steps, the customer journey level. And if you realize these 3 levels, what we do, I'm going to skip these ones just to have more time for a question. No, I'm not. We plot the behavioral steps. Those steps are not just on the website, right? People are using multiple devices, multiple moments. They are omni-channel, blah, blah, blah. You want to have that in view. Otherwise, you're not going to tell the rest of the company a lot about the whole customer journey. So you plot that. You know where you're testing. You analyze your testing power. How much tests can I run there? And then you go to science to find what determines those behavioral steps. It's what we call verified insights. Right? That's your starting point. And the more you're testing, the more verified insights you have yourself. Right? And then you start looking in the data. All right, is this truly determining in my case? Can I find segments that should differ? And they should differ, right, if that is really determining the behavior. And you might, in the end, optionally listen to your customer. So we have verified, view, and voice as our find the determinants trick. Now you know what is determining the behavior. Now you set up hypothesis how to boost that, right? How to be more effective therein. And you formulate a lot of hypotheses. And then in order to test them, you analyze data a lot. Don't start testing a hypothesis before you did an analysis, whether there's proof in the data already that you're on the right spot. Because you need a high winning percentage of tests. Because otherwise your false positive rate is wrong. And then you test it massively. And then you have the 3 levels. And what we do is we plot them. So we have this segmented customer journeys. You can select the segment up there, and it will have a different customer journey, different behavioral steps. And then you plot that against the hypothesis, like the determinants of the behavior and the techniques with hypothesis, how to boost it. And then you have a matrix where you can start plotting all your efforts that you're doing. Because every test is focused on one hypothesis in one step of the whole customer journey, right? And we find that this should not be shown to board level. This is the team at work, because they can very easily click on any of these tests. Every dot is either a test or a data analysis, and it will just pop up. And they could just, okay, we did this hypothesis quite a few times already on this step. We had a high winning percentage of tests. And they just go through them to re-grab that information. And we start finding which hypotheses are most effective. And we start finding in which step do we make the most impact. And one times the other is our prioritization tool. Right? And what are we prioritizing? Hypothesis, not A/B tests. Because we want to really learn about that behavior in the long run. And that's what the psychologist in the team is eventually doing. He's creating a learnings document, sometimes even for small hypothesis levels. We learn so much about this determinant, and I wrapped it up in this document, and I spread it into the rest of the company so that everyone gets on board of the evidence, everything, test everything philosophy. And we also do it sometimes for a behavioral step. So this segment, what determines them taking the next step? We can also write a small report there. But at least we have the overall report for that customer journey segment. And that should be nicely visualized with a nice storyline so that even a stupid CEO gets it. And the marketing department gets it, right? And we're going to make an impact. And we are no longer one of the marketing tools. No, we really become the evidence everything layer within the company that is sort of entering the DNA of finding out really what drives customers. Because we realize we're actually testing behavioral, doing behavioral experiments. It's one big psychological experiment. I hope this is going to help you a little bit to gain real knowledge about the customer. And I'm even hoping that you're going to share that knowledge with society, with universities, with the customer, because you are currently learning so quickly what drives our behavior that there's a new gap starting to evolve, and that's your knowledge and the customer who still thinks he's in control of his behavior, and we should not be unethical. Do your thing with good intent. That's it.